Rob Brydon is a Welsh actor and comedian, presenter, singer, writer, and podcaster who has been adored by audiences across the nation for years. He also happens to be a dab hand at an impression. He has graced our screens for decades and appeared in some of the UK's most loved TV shows, including Gavin Stacey as the beloved Uncle Bryn. He has won countless awards for comedy, and in 2013, he was recognised for his services to comedy and broadcasting with an MBE, presented to him by Queen Elizabeth II. Most recently, he embarked on a tour recounting tales from his hometown in Baglan to Hollywood and back. And he continues his podcast, Brydon and, which he started in 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted to be in conversation with the inimitable Rob Brydon, and your host for this evening, me. So firstly, Rob, thank you for coming and chatting to me for In Conversation with at Rockwater.
My great pleasure.
I want to thank you. I really, really appreciate it. So people who are watching or listening this don't know, but my dad was the wonderful Ronnie Corbett. And you and Dad had a real friendship. So I wanted to kind of ask you first.
Yeah.
When did you first meet Dad?
Well, I can give you a very, very detailed answer to this. I first met him, I think, around 2001 or 2. I met your dad at a big function that the BBC used to have. They don't seem to have them anymore. Or maybe they do, and I don't get invited. But there used to be these big events, and you would go to them, and it was on one of the big stages at TV Centre. And you see, wow, all these different people there. And both of the Ronnies were there. And this was a huge thrill. Yeah. Wow. And another Ronnie Ancona, very talented Ronnie Ancona, she knew them, and she knew me, and she said, do you want to meet them? I said, well, of course. So I went over, and I met your dad, and I met Ronnie Barker, and I'd always felt an affinity with your dad, and he didn't disappoint. We seemed to sort of hit it off. He'd seen, I think, Marion and Geoff, and another show, Human Remains. Ronnie Barker said to me, you're the chap from Human Remains, aren't you? Yes, I've seen 3 of them. I thought, wow, okay. And he said about Julia Davis, who I did that with, he said, you should tell the girl that does that, she shouldn't always play dowdy. And I told your dad that some years later. He said, well, that's Ron. He said, a note for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, but your dad, actually, we had a strange connection because, just straight away, because my youngest daughter was about to be christened, and we had to go to these lessons or gatherings before you have the christening with the vicar and any other people that were going to have their child christened. And there was some relative of yours was there, maybe a nephew, so that your dad, so maybe a cousin of yours, East Sheen we lived in, do you know?
It's Grant Corbett.
That's right. And so your dad was aware of this because he said, now you were at the thing with I said, yes. So we had that little connection. Yeah. So that was the first meeting, and that was a thrill. And then the second one was he and your mum, Anne, you know her name, came to see me live with my show at Croydon. Okay. And I was so nervous knowing that he was in the audience. And when I was doing the sound check, I did my impression of him telling a joke just to kind of relax myself. And when I went out to do the show, I was a bit off because I was so worried because he was in the audience. You know, what's he going to think? And then at one point, about 10 minutes in, I heard, and I thought, thank God, that was your dad.
I know. And, you are the best person, may I say, at impersonating him. He's quite tough to get.
Thank you.
But you get him.
All the people that I do impressions of, I like, right? everybody. So it's always, it ties in with that thing of imitation being the sincerest form of flattery.
Yeah.
And I was particularly fond of your dad. I do feel like sort of as if it's sort of giving him a hug or something. You know, when I do it, because I do, you know, love that sort of voice, you know, and then and as he got older, it got deeper, you know, and deeper like that. Yeah, wonderful sort of sounds there, you know. So
it's so lovely. I might kind of well up a few times in this interview because in doing the research, man, you are like him.
Really?
Yeah, you are. And when we tap in through your life, because I've got just a few notes here, Rob.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like I knew you because I know you because of you being Dad's friend and us meeting before. But when I kind of look into people and what's happened in their life or how you got there or things, that you say certain things, which is Dad. It's a certain way of looking at life and what's important to you.
Well, I've thought that in the past. I must admit, I have thought that, and I'm always wary of saying it because the risk is, well, who do you think you are? You know, Ronnie Corbett. I mean, Ronnie touched far more people than I have. But I do. Yeah, I do feel that, and I felt that long before I'd met him. When I would watch him, I always felt an affinity with him more than Ronnie B because of his warmth. Ronnie B didn't have your dad's warmth. He simply didn't, and I felt the same with Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. And I thought often a similar dynamic. You could compare them and the two Ronnies in that you had Peter who wrote and was you right, but Dudley had, like your dad, amazing rhythm
patter
and warmth. And so they were quite a similar sort of thing going on there. And again, I'm very loath to make any sort of comparison, only for fear of being shouted down.
But I think I can make the comparison.
Okay, but in the work I do with Steve Coogan, you know, you know, it's you can see that dynamic.
Yes.
In that Steve is the more clinical, forensic, and then I'm the warmth. So it's very nice that you say that.
No, I see it. I really do. Can we go? Can we? I know some people have heard it, but I've never heard it from you when you were on the golf course and Claire went into labour.
Well,
was it the Addington? Wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So I think I played golf with your dad twice. Once on the telly for a programme that he was doing. I think all about comedy or something. Because I did quite a few things with your dad. You know, quite a few shows. So we'd arranged to play golf, and it was 9 days before my now 14-year-old son, Tom, was going to be born. So I'd gone to play golf at Addington, and now this was the course that your house... Now, I know a lot about your family and your background. Originally you had another house that backed onto that course, is that right?
That was the first... yes.
Yes,
so is it the bungalow you played from, or the big house?
Yes, yeah, the bungalow.
Right, yes,
the bungalow.
We had... Yes, we'd own that, yes.
And when I tell the story, I always say it was a bit like the Bat Cave, because your dad had this, as I remember it, like a garage or something, or a shed, that he would keep the golf buggy in.
Yeah.
And he would come out straight onto midway through the course.
Yes.
And it was like going into the Bat Cave, and then, you know, in the old Adam West series, you would see it come out, and off we went onto the course, and we were playing, and I remember saying to him, I said, "Oh, you're very good, Ron." He said, "Well," he said, I played every day for 40 years, or whatever it was. If I'm not good now, I never will be. And we were playing, when lo and behold, my phone went, and it was my wife, Claire, saying, "I think it's happening." And this was 9 days early, you know. She'd been out with friends to Kew Gardens and had started... She was very stoic and was just going, "Oh, that's fine." Didn't want to annoy the friends at this trip. Anyway, she was then stuck in traffic trying to get back to our house, going, "Ah!" And I said to your dad, I think he said, "Well, we better get you home." So we get into the buggy, and we sped as much as a golf buggy can back across the course to your house. And he and your mum get me into my car. I've still got my golf shoes on. And I then try and get back from Addington.
Yeah.
It's not easy, back to Strawberry Hill.
It's a bit of a nightmare, actually.
And at that time of day, sort of tea time. And I got back, and by then it was too late. The midwife came to the house, too late for us to go. We were going to this very nice place where it was going to be a water birth and very holistic.
Yeah, and the music playing, the candles.
It was going to be all
lit.
lovely. We planned it all out.
Yeah.
And he ended up being born in our front room with me literally catching him.
Oh my goodness.
As Claire was, forgive me, darling, sort of bent
and it was Claire's
over.
first?
Yeah.
Oh my
So you can imagine how scary this was. Although I was more scared, she was, as ever, you know,
handled
much
it.
much calmer than me.
I wouldn't have been.
But I got a good sort of 12-minute routine out of this, you see, that I toured the country with. So it was... I
remember, though, I do remember it happening at home, because I can remember the excitement around our house that Claire had gone into labour, and I think Mum had done a sausage to make, you know, she used to make sausage sandwiches with Dad's homemade bread for you afterwards with a bit of mustard, but we ate them because you were
That's right, because I'd gone.
Yeah, you legged it. And there's another, and there's another one story that I've heard I'd love you to tell me, because I don't get to do this, do you know what I mean? So I'm taking the opportunity to talk about my dad with someone that loved him.
Talk about him all day, don't worry.
I'm not allowed to, but I'm going to. There was another thing when you were performing on stage.
So I'm in the West End and doing a run of shows. Well, there's two stories from this. You probably don't know the second one, but the first one was I'm there on the stage, and so as I said, that story became a big part of my act. You know, it was a really solid piece of material, and about how I had got married again. I already had 2 children, but here I was now having another child with Claire, and there I was playing with Ron. So I would tell the story, and when I would get to the bit about your dad, I would do the voice. Well, he and your mum came to the show at the Apollo on Shaftesbury Avenue. And as I'm doing that bit, and I'm a bit sort of, oh, God, how's this going to go down with him, you know? He stood up in his seat, right? And I thought, you know, you do think, well, is he a bit annoyed, you know?
Yes.
But he stood up and he came along his row, and there was a centre aisle.
Quite bold.
Yeah, very bold. In my memory of it, there's a centre aisle at the Apollo. I think there was, for me anyway. And he starts walking down to the front of the stage, and you could sense the audience going, as was I. I thought, well, what's he doing? And he got to the front, and he took off his glasses, and he handed them to me to put them on to do the impression with. So I carried on, you know, with the glasses there, and finished, and the audience went, yeah. And then he walked back, and they were cheering him. And
oh my goodness.
Very special.
I can see and feel that would be special.
Oh.
And quite brave. That's actually quite an out of character thing. You know what I mean?
Is that right?
It is actually quite an out of character thing, because Dad was very, you know, later I talk about being comedians and things like that, but you knew Dad when he was a comedian, but he was also quite a shy, could be gentle kind of person. So to get up and do that move and it be clear and him not be tripped, or, you know, it's quite bold.
It was amazing. Story. I mean, for me, it's an incredible thing to have happened.
Because he always loved young talent.
He was great like that. He was great like that. I mean, famously, he championed Harry Hill and the League of Gentlemen. Many others, I'm sure. I now know that as you get older, it can be hard to stay open to new stuff, because you have comfort in the things that you're familiar with and the things that made you laugh from years ago. And I think the best people stay open and current. And your dad was the epitome of that.
Yes.
Because he, through the Edinburgh Festival, would go and see. He came to see me when I was up in Edinburgh.
Yeah, I was going to say, because he used to love going to see.
Yeah.
And And also, he'd love that you were smart. Because the one thing he never understood is when he'd see stand-up comedians that looked like they, you know, ripped jeans and t-shirts. I mean, he didn't like that, did he? He was
your
hilarious.
dad was so sartorially good.
Yeah.
That's not the way to put it.
Well, he cared. It was appearance.
his-
And don't sit down in your jacket that you're going to go on stage with.
All that, yeah.
And the socks.
Old school stuff. Well, your dad was the one that, I said, great socks, duck egg blue. And I'm wearing colourful socks in honour of your dad. And whenever I put on colourful socks, I think of your dad.
A nice fine one too.
Yeah. Well, I once went out for lunch with him with David Walliams and down just off Jermyn Street, and we met at Turnbull and Asser.
Yeah.
If you're in London, go and see it. The Gentleman's Outfitters.
Oh,
so traditional
beautiful,
and beautiful and old school. And we went in, I always remember your dad introducing us to the assistant. I think his name was Kenny Williams, not that one. He said, boys, this is Kenny. He said, Kenny Williams, I'll see you at the restaurant. And then we went down to Green's.
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, David and I were like, you know, kids in a candy store, as the Americans would say. We were like, wow, we just met Ronnie Corbett here. And then, so we looked around. David bought half the shop. I bought some socks. And then we went down and had a wonderful lunch.
At Green's with Simon Parker Bowles. Dad had owned a bit of it.
Yeah, that's
didn't
right.
he?
Yeah.
With Simon Parker Bowles, Green's, Jermyn Street. I was actually in Jermyn Street 2 weeks ago. Took my girlfriend out for lunch, and I said, I'm going to take you. We didn't go to there. Obviously, Green's isn't there anymore. No. But we actually went to Fortnum's.
Yeah, that's right.
Because Dad used to take me there.
It's a great part of London, isn't it?
It's really great.
It's probably my favourite.
Me too.
Part
to saunter
of London,
about.
to saunter there and then up the Burlington Arcade, Piccadilly Arcade, Burlington Arcade, on Bond Street. You don't really need anything else.
It is a beautiful...
And it always reminds me of your dad.
Yeah, me too.
It always reminds me of your dad when I'm there. When they did that South Bank show, he and your mum, do you remember, walked along there, and that's in the South Bank show on your dad. You see them walking there.
Well, thank you for speaking to me about Dad. But
I could spend the whole interview talking about your dad.
Yeah, so could I.
Easily. I can't overstate.
That's going to make me cry. We're both going to cry, aren't we?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I know. I do know.
You know, becoming his friend, I didn't see that coming. And him liking what I did. Wow. You know, wow. Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
he did. So...
Anyway, there we are.
So now, moving swiftly. We'll come back to Dad, I'm sure, but I'm going to speak to you about you. And if
you must.
I must. So look, my pages. So you were born in
I was
Baglan,
born. This is true. There's no doubt.
Morgan.
Yes.
To Joy and Howard Jones.
Yes.
And you had two brothers, Jeremy and
Joy,
Peter.
yes. We lost my brother Jeremy. I have no memory of.
No.
And yet I would have been 5 or 6 when he died, a cot death. So I would have been aware of it, and I think I've just...
blanked it.
My mum says you didn't talk about it in those days, not like now, when everything is discussed and we know the benefit
of talking.
Of just talking.
Man, it's so
let alone
important.
talking to somebody who knows what they're talking about, just talking. So I have one memory of my mum in tears on a sofa. That's the only thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think we do that to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a natural... Yeah. It does that so that we can survive these things.
It makes sense.
How old was Peter?
He wasn't born then.
He wasn't born, so he's
So
younger.
he was after.
Right. Because you know that my mum and dad lost their first baby.
Yes.
And Andrew, and my mum always was frightened something would happen to her. You know, there was part of her. That's why she didn't go really back into the business. Because she didn't want anything to happen to us.
That was a huge thing for your mum, though, wasn't it, not to go back into the business? Because she had proper, full, successful, and she was terrific, because there are clips that I've seen.
But and she always said to me, she never regrets it, obviously, and I also think Dad wouldn't have been... she was his backbone, wasn't she? I mean, she was, there and supporting him.
but she always said to me, keep a finger in the pie, because if she heard Judy Garland sing or Barbara Streisand, a tear would come, because she, you know what her,
well, she
her
always
voice,
sang at
she still does. She's still
at any
there.
sort of event that we would go to, your mum would sing.
Yeah,
and then there was one where there was a tribute lunch to your dad at some fancy hotel. I can't remember which one now. Maybe the Savoy. And I spoke at it, told, because probably the stories I've told you, Jimmy Tarbuck, hilarious. Giles Brandreth, somebody else, who was it? All spoke. And then at the end, your mum and dad got up and did a turn, you know.
Oh my God, grab your coat. Was
I
it grab
think
your coat?
I think so. I think so. I can see them.
Because there's a wonderful story when Dad was doing for Christmas at LWT with Sandy Toksvig, and it was a Christmas special, and Sandy and Dad, he taught her the mum and his routine to grab your coat and get your hat. And there was a huge blizzard, and Dad had got Mum went shopping early in the day with Tom, my nephew, their grandson, and so they went shopping, and Dad was back in Addington, and he was coming in to do the show in the evening. They were all going to convene, and Tom and Mum were going to watch the show. And this blizzard hit so badly that Dad couldn't get to the theatre. And they were going, how far? And they had to start without him. And basically, it's the duet part. Sandy came running into the dressing room and said, he's not here, I don't know what to do. And Mum went, well, I know it. So she went, will you come and do it with me on stage? And Mum was like, well, if I have to. So basically, they practiced it, and they said, I'm really sorry, Ronnie's still stuck. But Anne is in the dressing room waiting for him. She's been shopping, so they came on, and Sandy Toksvig and my mum closed the show, and then my dad walked on with the camel coat and the snow on him just at the end to wait for the curtain came down. You know what? When I used to see my mum and dad perform together, I was just I'm just so proud of both of them.
And it's all you can remember, I would imagine, that mum and dad being performers. That's, of course it is, That's all you can remember. That was always...
But he was always my dad. Like, I bet your, people who say to me, what's it like having a dad as my dad? Yeah. And I'd be like, it was my dad.
Well, exactly.
I mean,
you don't know any
he still tells
different.
me off when I'm late and, don't eat so many biscuits. And
Well, you saying about him coming on at the end reminds me of another time, which I'd sort of forgotten about. I put on a concert once in Brydon to raise money for...
Felix.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So my son, Billy, was in Felix's year at school and is great friends with his brother.
I didn't know
Elliot,
that.
because he had a twin.
That's right. Yeah. Felix White.
Felix White.
Okay. As a little boy, sadly, passed away, but he had neuroblastoma. Yeah. Horrible, horrible, horrible thing to have. So, and I had got to know the family through whatever reason, and they said, well, put on a show. So we put on a show, and I got Michael McIntyre to come and do it. I think Jason Manford did it. There was some other people, I can't remember, sorry. And I asked your dad, now that's a big thing, but your dad's entrance, when they raised the roof, what we did was, at some point, because I was sort of hosting it, and Michael and Jason were brilliant, of course, and then I'm out there and I started to do my impression of your dad, daddy, and then he walked on from upstage, left or right, and the audience just went... Because he wasn't billed, you see, they weren't expecting him.
No, he was a treat.
They could not believe it. And he said something like, what are you doing, get off, or something like that. And, they couldn't believe it.
And the White family are the most incredible family, aren't they? I was actually in the audience that night, and so I was there.
Okay.
It was amazing. It was to raise money to get him to go to America, wasn't it, for treatment.
That's right.
Yeah. But they are amazing, and I bump into them a lot. And now the mum has given up she had a high-flying job. She now is midwife.
Is she?
Yeah. They're amazing.
And there's a bench, isn't there,
there
on
is
Brighton
seafront. Right on the seafront.
Because I was down
near
there.
Rockwater, who I'm the podcast we're doing in conversation with for Rockwater. Yeah. Rockwater's here, and Felix's bench is just here.
Well, I saw it just by chance because I was down visiting a friend, and we were walking along, and Claire said, "Well, look at this." So I took a photo and sent it to the families and dad.
Yeah, that was a wonderful, wonderful night.
It was great because they were, we got really good people to come down and do it.
you know, going slightly back, but was your mum, did it make her fearful? Or do you not remember that, or did she not really speak about it?
I don't know. No. We've spoken about it. Well, I've said with Claire, who's my wife, and I already had 2 children. And I remember when our boys were little, so I'd already had 3 children.
Yeah.
And then, and with those children, various things had happened. You know, my eldest girl had got pneumonia at one point when she was little. My son had broken his arm.
Yeah.
So I'd experienced these things. And when my kids with Claire were little, she used to say, "Oh, why are you being so protective? You know, sort of worrying something's going to happen." And I would say, well, because I've seen that it can happen.
Yes.
Because I have been in that situation. And we always... I mean, I'd like to be more like her, you know, not worrying that something's going to happen.
It's like that's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah. But I would say, well, I mean, my son Harry broke his arm at a bloody soft play, you know, at a snakes and ladders thing where you think, well, nothing can happen to them there. No, it's a soft play area, and he came out going with his arm swinging the wrong way, you know. So
it's terrifying.
So what I'm saying is that once something has happened.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than losing a child, then you'd have to be.
Yeah, you would have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so growing up, was that in your... What was the ambience like? Because from what I've read, actually, I don't know, I feel that your parents were really quite open and with their kind of emotions. Was there music in the house? Where did you get your love of music from? Because you love music from all different...
Yes. Well, here's the thing about that. I'm quite surprised when someone isn't into music. David Mitchell. I always come back to David.
Yeah.
I don't really don't listen to music much. And you don't? Not really.
It's like when people say they're not into food. Food and music, I'm like, well...
Yeah. It's not a criticism of David, who is a wonderful person with an abundance of fine qualities. But it's always a surprise to me. So I'd always loved music. We had a piano, and my mum would play, is it Fleur Elise? In my memory, that's the only thing she played.
Yes.
It can't have been. She must have played other things, but in my memory...
Yeah, that's what you remember.
It's just that... So we had a piano. They sent me for piano lessons. I couldn't crack it, and that's a regret.
Me too.
I would love to be able to play the piano.
So would I. And the guitar, actually, just to...
I can play the guitar enough to make you laugh and sing along with basic stuff, but with no finesse whatsoever. I can't do bar chords, for example. So there was music there, and we would have, the radio would be on, and we would have the music of the day. So, Barry White. We had a Barry White, because we had a fancy Sony cassette deck, which at the time, and I've since tracked one down on eBay and bought one, the same as I had when I was a kid, because it had faders on it.
That is fancy.
And it reminded me of the transporter room in Star Trek, because when they were going to beam someone down, they would go, and they would, so I would press it, close my eyes, stand. We had a circular rug that looked like the thing that they would get beamed in, and I would go, and then walk through another part of the room with my eyes shut, and then go, as if I'd been.
I'm here. I've been.
So we had Barry White, the Carpenters. We had them. What else do we have? And then one year, and I tracked this down as well, I was bought a 40 pop hits, and that had stuff like Devilgate Drive on it by Susie Quattro. I think it had Miss Grace. Right. It had Queen of Clubs on it, and all sorts. So that was so music there. And then I love Elvis. So
have you seen the movie?
Yeah, several times. Yeah.
Isn't he amazing?
Yeah. And started to slowly get into Elvis, but not properly until I was 12 when he died, because then they put all the films on the BBC and he was everywhere, and that's when I really got into him. So yes.
Is there anyone else in your family musical?
Well, my brother is a very good guitarist.
Is he?
Yeah, but but like me, not as a kid.
No.
He's 8 years younger than me, and he now is, you know, properly good, way better than me.
Yeah.
That in itself is not an achievement. You can be way better than me and still not that good. But he can do, you know, all this,
Yeah,
all
really
that
go
stuff.
for it.
Yeah.
Is your brother similar to you?
He's a lot taller. People see us next to each other and go. But yes, I can see lots of
It's like
similarities.
me and my sister. I can see the similarities, but yeah, and we're kind of similar and actually kind of not. And your dad I hear that he's your biggest fan.
Yes.
I love that.
I know, and then it's always funny because when I do my podcast, everybody has one. When I do my podcast, talking to performers,
I know
quite a few of them did not have encouraging parents, and then the received wisdom, is that a thing? Yeah. Received wisdom is well, that's the secret of your success because that made you. Who was it? Who did I speak to the other day? Who said? Was it Harry Enfield was telling me that his dad was never that... Oh, yeah, I think it was. Was never that impressed with what he was doing, didn't particularly like it. My dad always has.
Seen you.
Always loved everything and will let people know that he's my dad. You know, there's a type of family that would you know, don't mention it.
Yeah.
Oh, my dad.
The opposite.
Oh, yeah.
But I actually think, you know, reaching the age I have, that actually it's really important. I think a lot of us, or a lot of humans, actually all we want is our parents' approval and to know they're proud of us.
Yeah, I've come to think that it's a very basic... growing up in the Amazon thing with just somebody just being very nurturing and there's so many theories, aren't there, to the different ways you should raise children. And I know from having 5 children that so much of it is just their personality, their brain chemistry. And then, I mean, the whole nature-nurture thing is, as someone with 5 children, is fascinating to me. And I've read a few books about this.
Because also in that generation, actually, it was quite rare for, I suppose, a gushy dad. Not gushy, but proud. Because sometimes it's. I think it's rare, but I just think it's really, really lovely.
Well, yeah, it's very it's a very interesting thing. But he was always very encouraging, as was my mum. But my dad. More obviously so. And in fact, the first professional gig... Well, actually, no. When I was a teenager, I was wanting to be a performer, and my dad knew a guy who had maybe he owned a hotel cum bar cum club somewhere around Neath. And they were looking for a singer to sing in this place. Excuse me. So he arranged me to have an audition. And he took me there on a Sunday lunchtime, I think. And I have a memory of singing Love Is in the Air to a backing tape.
How old were you?
I think I would have been 16, something like that,
okay.
17. Love is in the air, everywhere I look around. I didn't get the job. But Dad took me to that. And then when I was at drama school, I had a double act with my friend James Lovell, where I played a guy called Tony Casino, who was a nightclub entertainer, a would-be Tom Jones, but was also very camp. and the first gig I got was while I was at drama school, and BBC Radio Wales used to have a show, a bit like Pebble Mill at 1.
Yeah.
It was called Level 3, and it was performed in the cafe foyer area of St David's Hall in Cardiff on the Level 3, and they would have a famous guest and a local act, and we were the local act. I went up, sang 2 songs. I used to do Lionel Richie's. I've been doing it I do it in the current tour, where he'd go, I've been alone with you inside my mind. And he goes, hello. And that was the joke. And I did that. And Dad came to that.
Yes.
And I have a photo of him coming and sitting with me and James, all excited, before the show. So
Yeah.
so that's the thing, you know, that he took time off work.
Yeah.
You know, he stepped away from work.
Yeah, and academically, you didn't like
No.
exams very much.
No.
I'm actually very similar to that.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And with your mum being a teacher,
Yeah.
they saw that you they weren't worried about it because they thought, no, this it's not important.
And that's really interesting now as a parent.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I could be that. I would try to be that relaxed. But I mean, lucky in as much as I'd found my thing at school where they had really good musicals with a fantastic drama teacher director called Roger Burnell, who was young then. He was out of drama school, and he was so good.
And which school was that? Because
this was Porthcawl Comp,
Yeah.
I went to school in Swansea, first of all, and then we moved. We lived in Baglan. I was at school in Swansea, Dumbarton.
And was that a comprehensive?
No, that was a private. That was a private.
So swapping from
yeah.
private to comprehensive is quite... Because my eldest did that.
Oh, okay.
And I know...
How did it go?
You know what? Because he's acting,
Yeah.
and he said thanks, Mum, because he saw he's very good with people, so he's quite gregarious, thank goodness, because otherwise it could be a roast.
Yeah.
On the first day he came home and said, Mum, please get me some Vans. My shoes are smarter than the teachers. When we went to the comp, he was, and they called him Michael McIntyre because he had all that. And he was like, please. But I wanted to speak to you because that is a thing, going from like a massive school, from a small school where everyone says hello, sir, morning, sir, and then to.
Well, the school Dumbarton was incredibly cosy and lovely. I mean, really lovely school, intimate. Family run. Yeah. So the headmaster, in my memory now, it all takes on a kind of filmy quality, doesn't it now? Which is
like
probably
soft edges.
Exactly. But it was this lovely, lovely school. Elmer Thomas was the headmaster, and he had chalk white hair. And he would wear a black gown every day in my memory. I don't know if he had with a suit underneath it. And he would sometimes come into the classroom and he would get a textbook. Do you remember those? They don't seem to exist anymore. Everything's bloody iPads. But he would get a textbook and he would push the page down like that. And he would put his hand out. And it was all like something from a film.
Yes.
And his son, Alid, was the deputy head, and his daughter, sorry, can't remember her name, she was called Miss Thomas. She must have had her first name, and she was the, and it was all lovely, and it was very nice. It was an old house with a lawn out the front and different levels and an art room up there.
Not too big, cosy.
Not too big, different classes, and they had this one bit. So you'd play football on what must have been now, as you said, very small, but I remember it as being quite big. They had table tennis tables under a cover thing where I fell once while I was running and cut my head open, and a bigger boy picked me up and carried me with blood gushing towards someone. Then they took me to hospital and they gave me stitches. But they had a bit where those old-fashioned desks, like Tom Brown's school days desks, and they had a sort of repository of the old ones under a covering, all these old desks piled on, but you could go in and explore through the canyons that were made.
Desks.
Yes, you shouldn't have done it, very dangerous, but and so romantic in the biggest sense. And a gym, here's a thing, a gym cum hall where we put on a production of Star Wars, because it was the big hit film. It went down a treat in Wales, Star Wars. It really caught on. It struggled in other areas, but... So we wrote a stage version of it where I, of course, gave myself this best role as Luke Skywalker, and the stormtroopers were in skateboard helmets, a stormtrooper mask with elastic, and cricket whites. And we couldn't make an R2-D2 because it was too difficult, spherical. So we made K9 from Doctor Who, which is like an old box. But before it, I went out to entertain the audience in front of the cloth, in front of the...
And how old were you then?
Well, if we say that Star Wars came out in 77, didn't it?
Yeah.
Did it?
No idea.
All right, I think it did.
Yes, I'm
So let's say 78. I would have been about 13.
Right.
Okay? But to go out, first of all, as the warm-up, I went out and did jokes from the Two Ronnies joke book. Now, I didn't do them as an impression of your dad, because I didn't start doing the impression until years later. But I did the jokes, and I did the one about, I probably couldn't say it now. Oh, listen to me, that's such a terrible thing to say now. A swimmer, a Swedish swimmer, who got into trouble in the North Sea, was pulled out of the sea by a Scottish trawlerman, and she was covered in an old Macintosh, Mr. Angus Macintosh of Fife, who was delighted. And I was doing these jokes, and I have a memory in my head, and I don't know if this is right or not, of the teachers, so all the kids are there in rows watching, one of whom would have been Catherine Zeta-Jones, because she went to that school.
So she went to your first... Wow.
Yeah. And I have a memory of the teachers stood at the side, looking a little disapprovingly as I told these jokes, where's he going to go? But so there we are.
Wow.
So there I was at that young age doing some of your dad's material.
Yeah. We've all done some of Dad's material. We've been performing, we've forgotten stuff, fill in with Dad. Dad was like, you haven't done my gags again, have you? We were like, yep.
But also the rhythms of your dad.
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm doing my show on stage, I'm very aware of all the different people that have influenced me, and your dad is very high up on that list. And I can, that was a bit like Ron, wasn't it? That rhythm there, the way you set that up. You love that. So that school was lovely.
Yeah.
Loved it. And then we were moving to Porthcawl, right?
Yep.
And you're going to go to the comp. And my knowledge of a comprehensive school was Grange Hill.
Yes.
Which to me was a portrayal of gritty, urban, and I thought, God, I was terrified. Now, Porthcawl Comprehensive.
And how old were you then? So if you're 30... So
I think it's around...
Quite a delicate age.
Around then, I think. I think that Star Wars was my swan song.
Yeah.
And it was the beginning of me wanting to perform. So I remember sitting in the headmaster's office, and I was joining at Easter term, right?
Yeah.
Not at the beginning of an academic year. Easter term of the fourth form. So the O-level syllabus had started in the September. And I never caught up, you know. And but I wasn't interested either, really.
No.
Because they had a fantastic drama department, and I can really remember sitting with the headmaster. His name was Mr... Oh, God damn it. Mr. Ebsworth. Mr. Ebsworth was a lovely, lovely man. And his family sort of have been in touch over the years. And... well, we've got a drama department here, because my mum said Rob likes acting and things. They're doing West Side Story. So they'd cast it, pretty much all of it, but I managed to get a part as one of the Jets in that, with one line, which was, it hurts, it hurts. Oh, yeah, I did all that. Officer Krupke and all that stuff.
Yeah, great.
And it was going to that school. And it took me a few days to settle in, but it was a very nice school. It was a lovely school, great people. And... I found my thing in the drama department, and I met Ruth Jones, because she was there as well.
I mean, was that as much fun as I can imagine it was? You and Ruth Jones.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like it was. She wasn't Nessa then.
I want to be in the part. I want to be in that.
She didn't say what's occurring or anything, but I mean.
If you subscribe to a fabric of life coloured by the sea, subscribe to Open Water from Rockwater for exclusive performances by international recording artists and world-class musicians, celebrity talks, and stand-up comedy, to film screenings by firesides, well-being workouts and beach-bound meditation. Open Water gives you exclusive access to the best that Rockwater has to offer. Played out over 3 floors, just a stone's throw from the water, with remarkable food and drink experiences for company. To find out more, contact the team today. openwater@rockwater.uk. Open Water, made by the sea.
What were you like at school? Were you...
It was like I am now, but a little bit shorter. I was. Well, I liked...
Did you entertain the class?
Yes. I liked it. I liked school. Not the academic side.
No.
I think I looked on it like a sort of club, like a gentleman's club or something, because the drama thing was such a big thing there.
And the teacher, so you...
Roger Burnell, yeah.
Because teachers that inspire us and see us are
a very good
so
English
important.
teacher. I had two very good English, but
Well,
one of them,
great.
Les Edwards, not gone now, not with us, but he was inspirational as well. He was one of those teachers that try and make you think. And we did Sweet Charity, and he played the Sammy Davis Jr. part. Daddy, what's his name? Daddy something, Big Daddy something. Just the Rhythm of Life song, you know him?
Yes.
So he played that part. And
Your teacher did?
Yeah. Some of the teachers would play some of the parts.
Oh, really? They'd come in and do some parts?
Yeah, so when we did Carousel, I think a teacher played...
That's my mum's
policeman or something.
favourite.
Carousel. Well, I played Billy in that.
Oh, that's
and
my-
Ruth was not Carrie. Was she Carrie Pipperidge? Maybe, I can't remember.
I'm so bad with names.
She wasn't due. Anyway, so he was great as well, and so I started to really I liked it there, you know.
Which is great, because when I just
much.
heard, I saw sometimes I can imagine that could be quite hard for some children. You know what I mean? If you had to make that swap, but my son was happy with it. Because
you've got to have your thing. You've got to have your thing, and I always say, so maybe if I'd been sporty, that would have been okay, because hey, he's good at that. Well, I was good at.
And I suppose, like when you're speaking about your children, saying I wouldn't be so cool about it, because actually, luckily, my parents were pretty cool. That I wasn't very good in exams. I'm dyslexic, so. But I had my thing. I was at ballet school.
Right.
You know, so they didn't.
Well,
which is lucky, because I feel for kids that find exams hard, because it doesn't mean you're not bright.
No.
It just means you've got a different way, and so schooling can be difficult, but it is difficult when you've got your own children, because you want to go, don't be lazy, do your best, but it doesn't matter what, you know, but it's...
Well, also because you realise that it's such an incredible opportunity to fill your mind with knowledge that can
I'd quite
only
like to go
be
back.
because
you're so young, aren't you?
Every adult I know says that, you know, because you know as an adult that you can't know too much. The number of conversations I can't join in because I don't know anything. I'll be on a film set or something, or a TV show or something, and people are talking about some historical event, and all I've got to offer is a bit like when I used to go on QI. All I'd ever have to offer, unless it was about Elvis, was a stupid, jokey take on it, you know. Which is why I stopped doing QI, because I thought, oh God, you know, all I can do here is flip it around and make a very predictable joke.
Yes. So, not going to do that. So, family is really important to you, and this is another time where I thought, this is why you and my dad got on so well, because you said your biggest achievement by far is your children.
Yes, but when I say that, and I banged on about that in interviews, I want to say I'm not saying that I'm particularly good at it, right? No. But undoubtedly,
to you, they're important.
Yes,
it's like Dad never left us behind. You know, and that is rare. It's kind of rare to be such a family man and be so successful. It's very hard to get a balance.
I think some people that become very successful make great sacrifices.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, I mean, there are plenty of people way more successful than me. You know, your Ricky Gervaises and all those guys who go boom into the stratosphere. But for me, work isn't the big thing. I keep using the word balance.
Yeah, it is.
And I think perhaps because of being married and then getting divorced when my oldest kids were very young, it was very upsetting.
Yeah.
And you know,
yeah.
So, but that was when I first became very successful.
Yeah.
By my standards. You know, a couple of shows on BBC.
Yeah, amazing.
Going on to Parkinson.
Yeah.
They're writing about you in the Sunday Times. You know, it was a big old thing. But it didn't equate with being happy. In fact, it equated with the worst time, most turbulent time of my life, which I think has been a good thing in the long run, because it's meant I've never been fooled by the idea that if your show is number one, you're going to be happy.
Yeah,
and
it
so
is a balance.
I've sought for balance.
Yeah, it is balance, and that is, in a way, what Dad pulled off as well.
Yeah.
With my mum packing up the house and going on tours with the guinea pigs, and we all came with. So you've got 5 children, 2 girls, 3 boys.
Yeah.
Ages range 11 to 28.
Correct.
And any of them showing?
Well, my eldest
signs?
is in the casting business.
Okay.
Yes.
28.
28.
Okay.
Yes. And my young.
I'll tell Dylan.
Yeah. send her his stuff. And my youngest is definitely has a performing bent.
Yeah.
Can play the guitar, can sing, can do all that stuff.
Yeah, loves it.
The others are all witty, I would say. The others all have timing, which makes me very happy. Yeah. But it's the first, and I can assure you the last, that that have actually gone. Well, George hasn't gone into it, but
no.
But it wouldn't surprise me if he did.
No. And when did you first think, oh, I'm funny and I like this? I like what this is.
Well, as long as I can remember,
yeah.
In all honesty, as long as I can remember. Because I can remember being a kid of, what age would I have been? I don't know, 5, 6, 7. There was a comedian in Wales called Ryan Davis. Your dad would have been aware of him. Because he had a double act in Wales called Ryan and Ronnie. It was Ryan Davis and... Was he a Ronnie Davis or Ronnie something else? And Ryan was very much the comedy guy, and I think Ronnie was more of a straight man. I hope I'm not doing his family a disservice.
Straight mans are important, though.
Oh, good God, yes.
If a funny man hasn't got a straight man, they're very, very lost.
Yes. But that's what was very interesting with your dad, of course, was there was no straight man. They could sort of play that role within a thing, and that was what was so glorious.
Magic about them, wasn't there?
The other thing, while I remember it, which people should be made aware of, is the discipline of what your dad and Ronnie B did. You watch those shows. How the hell did they learn those scripts?
I know.
Look how, and they were all about verbal dexterity, a lot of those things back and forth.
I know.
Just to learn them, let alone perform them, was a feat of...
And when there's programs out now that you see them actually being filmed and they've made mistakes, they go pick it up on the pan went over there, and they just go straight in.
They were straight in. Yeah, the discipline was incredible.
It was. The discipline. Dad was always disciplined though. Yeah. His whole being was whether he had half a biscuit.
That's right. Very true.
Yeah, because I was lucky enough to work with him too. In 4 pantomimes.
Did you?
Yeah, when I was actually pregnant with Dylan, and I didn't actually tell anyone I was pregnant until after the end of rehearsals because I knew they'd all panic.
Yes.
I actually played his daughter, and he was Mother Goose. Yeah.
Where was that?
Churchill in Bromley.
So near home then?
Yeah,
so
we were near home.
Right.
Oh, it was a joy.
And when would that have been? What year?
Oh my gosh, I'm really bad. Well, Dylan's 25.
Right, so what's 25 years ago from now?
Oh my goodness. Mass dyslexia.
Well, here we go. It's 2022.
Yeah.
So there's 22 of the years, right? So we go back to 2000.
Yeah.
And then you need another 3. 1997.
1996, because I was pregnant.
1996.
And it was really funny when I'd work with Dad, actually, because we'd ignore each other. In the first few days of rehearsal, no one knew I was his daughter.
Gosh.
Because we always were very coy about it. It's like we always answered in 3 things. And I even heard Mum do it. So someone would go, oh, what does your dad do? And I'd say, oh, he's in television. Ah, well, we know him. You might do. What does he do? Oh, he's a comedian. Who is he? And I'd do that because you didn't want people to judge you or feel... People would already they'd already treat you in a certain way. And I once went out with Mum, and I couldn't believe it when somebody said, oh, and what's your husband doing? She went, oh, he's in the business. Oh, yes, he's in television. And she did exactly the same thing. We really laughed.
You weren't aware that you both did it?
No.
Oh, that's interesting.
No, we all just were... I suppose if you suddenly come out, people go, who... you know, we didn't, you know, you don't want people to be hard on you.
Yeah,
And go,
yeah,
so
yeah.
we'd do that. So when we start rehearsals, we'd nod at each other across the room. And then it was so funny. People, you know, then they got to know.
Did you have a professional surname that was different then?
No, but they just didn't.
Well, they
when
must
you
have
But when you go
suspected.
into rehearsal, so say you go into rehearsal and, you know, you don't look, and go, surname. You might go, Ronnie Corbett's in it, or Jimmy Tarbuck's. I worked with Jimmy too. He was hilarious.
Did you?
Yeah, I did pantomime with him.
Did you?
Yeah, hilarious.
Which pantomime?
Jimmy didn't know his lines like my dad.
Yeah,
You can imagine.
Yeah. I bet your
Jimmy made it up.
dad
We
knew
were like,
him. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, Dad. But he led the way, didn't he? If you work with Dad and he comes in and he's off script,
That's right.
Then the next day everybody else is, and then you can relax.
Yes.
You know, it was, and you know, Jimmy was as much a joy.
Where did you do it with Jimmy?
Again at the Churchill.
I was there, was it? Right, yeah. So it's just convenient. And
Yeah.
2 shows a day sometimes?
6 days a week. 6 days a week.
2 shows a day for 6 days a week?
Yeah.
I'm always wary of this because people that don't work in this job are going, what are you talking about? It's just a normal day's work.
No.
But it's awfully tiring, you know.
Yes.
But was that hard? No.
No.
Oh, so I'm the big lightweight here. Okay.
No, the last one I did though with Dad, which was actually, that was 1996.
Yeah.
He was like, oh man, if I do this again, I can't do 2 shows, because Dad wasn't lazy, was he? So when he did a pantomime, he did all the dance routines. I did the ballet thing with him in the tutu when I was young, trying not to laugh at him. But people didn't know, we'd be very coy about it, and then we'd get relaxed when they got to know us for who we were.
Yeah, yes.
Rather than, you would hate people to assume you got the job because that's with me, and what was my thing. But
But the other thing there, though, is if that was 96, people that were big then were bigger than people that are big now, because everything is so fragmented now, and you can be very successful. So in 96, I still, and also your dad was Ronnie Corbett. It was a bigger thing. You know the way now someone will say to you, oh, there's that amazing show, you got to watch it on Netflix, and you haven't even heard of it. But then when you look into it, you find it's a huge thing, because there's just so much choice now.
There's so much,
So you can be a huge deal here, and then these people here don't even know you exist. Whereas, at the height of your dad, it was everybody.
Yeah, we're sitting round on watching.
Everybody would have known.
Yeah. So you went to drama college.
Yes.
3 years, but you left.
I left early because that radio thing, because of going on and doing that turn on that show. I was interested in radio. I'd been on Swansea Sound in 1978 as their junior DJ. And our junior DJ this week is Robert Jones, because my name is Robert Brydon Jones.
Yes.
And I had to lose Jones to join Equity, because you couldn't have the same name as another actor.
Yes,
Brydon
I was going to,
was my mum's maiden name.
Got you.
My grandfather was Robert Brydon as well. Big golfer. If you go to Jersey Marine Golf Club, you'll see his name on the Champions Board from about 1970-something. I think he won it twice, maybe 3 times. I found the idea of being a DJ very interesting, and I sent off for a book called How to Be a DJ. And whenever I would see pictures of Tony Blackburn and Noel Edmonds at Radio 1, I found it quite sexy, by which I mean, in the broader sense,
it did
exciting.
Look sexy. Yeah, it did.
The turntables and the cartridge machines. I loved that, and so I thought I'd like to do that. So when I'd been on this radio show, doing the turn with my friend James, I would go back then every Friday. I'd bunk off college and go and hang out there. And they got to know me.
Yeah.
And they got to know that I was someone who could do funny voices. So they would ask me to do a voice here, a voice there. And because of that, they got to know me. And then when one of the presenters was going away, who presented a quiz show, I took over for a week or 2 weeks. And then I was taken over for a DJ. Hey, how you doing? And then they offered me his job. So because he was moving on to a better slot.
Yeah.
So I became the 6:30 to 7:30 early morning disc jockey.
And when did you start? Did you do quickly? Did you do all the?
Yes, they call it self-opping.
I've done a bit of radio DJing, but thrown in slightly at the deep end. And somebody did that for me, and then they said, well, you have to learn all that. And I thought, oh, that's terrifying.
No, but you sort of want... I mean, I've done a few shows on Radio 2 since then. And have I ever self-opped? Yes, I have. I did self-op on Radio 2, actually, because I've sort of sat in for Steve Wright and I've sat in for Ken Bruce. it's better if you control it yourself, but it's different now. It's all computerized now, so it's not like in my days. You're not in my day. You're not playing vinyl, and getting it. You go back half a revolution from where it begins.
Yeah.
There's none of that.
No,
it's all
I'd be
different,
really
and you
lost
see it
then.
coming up on a screen.
So when did you start writing? Because then I've
long
jumped
time.
because I kind of look. I mean, the work you've done is unbelievable in all different.
You should be ashamed. It's awful.
It's
work.
not. I was like, man, this is amazing, and then I suppose and when I was trying to wait, your career started to move forward with two projects where people suddenly became aware.
Yes.
More broadly of you was Human Remains,
Yeah.
and Marion and Geoff.
Yes.
And I went back and watched them.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so, when did you start writing?
You didn't like them?
I loved them.
Oh, okay.
Marion and Geoff, though.
Yeah.
Geoff broke my heart.
Keith.
Keith, is it Keith?
Jeff is the guy that she leaves him for.
Oh no, not yet. Keith.
Yeah.
I stand. Sorry, apologies.
You please
Keith
don't apologise.
broke my heart.
Yeah.
But I was laughing one minute and crying the next.
Well, it was a live show as Keith that your dad and your mum came to see in Croydon. It was the Keith Barrett show live. No, it was Marion and Geoff. I was going around the country as him, giving a lecture on making divorce work, and that's the first one that they saw. And then I think they saw that as well in Edinburgh. And then they came to see me when I was doing it under my own name.
I mean,
I'm very proud of that. That was 2000, and Human Remains, where Julia Davis and I played a different couple in each episode. But for a long time, I was working as a disc jockey on the radio because I fell into it. They just offered me the job. So I left college early, earned enough money to buy a little house, a little starter home, tiny little thing in Cardiff, and did that, but wanted to be doing comedy. And I would do the odd comedy bit. But you mentioned writing. So I co-wrote Human Remains, and I co-wrote Marion and Geoff. And I've written several things since then. But for a long time, and I find this quite interesting, your viewers and listeners will have to decide whether they do, I thought writing was something other people did. Mm-hmm. And I all the time really that I was in the radio, although I suppose I started writing because then I had a radio show called Rave, which is where I first did with Alan Thompson, who passed away too soon. We would do these characters, and that's where Keith Barrett first appeared, and loads of other characters. And I would, in fact, write those. I would write little monologues then. So I suppose I started then. But for a long time, it would never occur to me that I could write. I'd got 2 O-levels when I was at school, the first time. And I think I thought of myself as somebody that... I eventually ended up with 5, because I had to have 5 to get the grant for drama school.
But I think this is a really great message too for kids that do struggle. Doesn't mean to stop. I mean, because I didn't get very many exams, I always put myself down in that that education, academic
but it's
way.
Interesting,
but it's
because
not,
I would never have said that I'd put myself down, but I've thought about this more recently. And I think in my own way I did. I mean, in a very soft way.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you'll forgive me, over the years, people have said things to me, and they may be wrong. Oh, you're very clever. They'll see a show, right, where I'm doing things. Oh, but you're smart. You're so very... And I will have genuinely said to them, no, I'm really not. I can do some funny things.
Yes.
And I think that it's because of having 2, which then became 5 O-levels. Oh, well, I'm not that... And it only struck me the other day at my age. I went, wow, you passed 2? If someone told me they passed 2 O-levels, I would have thought they'd have trouble figuring out how to put a key into a lock. I mean, 2? When really all you've got to do is learn stuff. It's just a memory test at O-level, really speaking, if you're willing to put the time in.
But if you're finding other things
interesting... But I'd sort of accepted that for years. I'd gone, I got 2 O-levels. And it's in the last year or so, I suddenly went, 2? What on earth were you doing?
I know.
But I think that my That's the way my mind works. And even now, I like doing lots of different things. I don't like to be doing the same thing for too long. I love
chop
variety.
and change.
Yeah.
So after the success, though, of Marion and Geoff and Human Remains, you won Best Drama at the South Bank Awards.
Yeah.
And then Best Comedy Newcomer at the British Comedy Awards.
Yes.
How did that feel?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Because I'd got to a point where I'd always had a lot of faith that I would become successful. But towards the end, I was beginning to think it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I was surrounded by people telling me I was good. I'd had that all my life, from my parents and family to the other students at college. Unless I was very deluded, my memory of college is that I was thought of as being particularly funny. You know, that's how I felt they were receiving me, you know. And then when I'd start to do stuff, always very funny, but I couldn't get gigs, couldn't get jobs, you know, for casting directors, I couldn't get seen. So there was something missing there.
How did you take rejection, you know, to other people?
I didn't know hard. Well,
how do we keep?
I was resilient. I kept going. I didn't like it.
No.
But I clearly kept going. And when I wrote an autobiography at a preposterously young age, but when my dad read it, he said, God, I didn't realise how hard it had been. And I have to say, I didn't realise it until I read it back. Because when you're living it, I think you're going, right, next corner, round the next corner is going to be the thing, round the next corner. So you don't look further until maybe a year or so before, so the late 90s, I was thinking, oh, this isn't going to happen. But I thought, but by then I was earning a nice living as a voiceover artist. Yeah. So, you know, Bounty, Taste the Exotic, Have a Break, Have a Kit Kat, Philadelphia with Chives. I was doing all that stuff, right? I could do that with my eyes shut till the cows come home. And I thought, well, all right then. And I had a bit of radio work. I thought, okay, I'm not going to be Peter Sellers, which is kind of what I hoped to be, or even Steve Coogan, because by then I was aware of Steve. Yes. And was going, wow. And not just wow, but also, ooh.
When did you meet Steve Coogan?
I met him in Reading, at the Holiday Inn, the bar of the Holiday Inn. I'm going to say 97. He was touring The Man Who Thinks He's It. I knew Julia Davis. She was in that show with Simon Pegg. I'd already bought tickets to go to that show before I knew Julia was in it. Right. I said, right, well, I'm coming. When she started rehearsing with him for that show, I phoned her up at the end of that first day of rehearsal and said, what's he like? Right? That was the thing.
Steve.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he is. I'd say he's probably the biggest comic talent Britain has, and I include all the other ones you may think of in that world. Yeah. You know, there's no one better than him. No. You may say someone is the same.
I saw him really young at the Comedy Store.
Did you?
In fact,
when he was doing impressions and things? Yeah,
Dad, Mum, Emma and I went.
Did you?
And he was doing, we were hidden in the dark corner, he was doing being Arnold Schwarzenegger as my dad.
That's right, yeah.
So back in the day.
That's right, yeah. He used to do Your Dad in Vietnam, didn't he?
The best, though.
I think I do.
You think you do?
I think I do. I think that...
You do.
I think... Overall, Steve does better impressions. I think he does more forensic ones, right? Yes. They're so... But I do think I get Your Dad better than him. But I always say with Steve that his impressions are so accurate, but joyless. So I met him... So I'd said to Julia, I'm coming to that show, I'll come and see you afterwards. She forgot. At the time, I was rather hurt. I now realise, having done many, many shows, it is incredibly easy to forget that someone is coming to your show and that you've said you're going to see them afterwards, because it's not the first thing on your mind. No. So I went to the stage door and I said, oh, hi, yeah, I come see Julia. Oh, no name yet. So I don't know how, but I ended up in the bar of the hotel, and before you've had your break, you live under the often illusion that were you to meet somebody in a position of influence, they could make it all happen for you, right? And I thought this of Steve. So there he was in the bar afterwards. This is a long time ago now. This is 25 years ago. And Julia introduced me to him. I said, great show. He said, oh, yeah. And I just tried to make some connection. I knew Peter Serafinovich, who he knew from the voiceover world. I do voiceover, Steve. So we had a brief meeting there.
Yeah.
And I genuinely think he saw a tall, willowy blonde walking. And he went, oh, sure. And he was gone, right?
Yeah.
And then I saw him, but I was wow. But the big thing of meeting him was I had made a tape. So I'm floundering, right? I got the odd part in some sitcoms, got a part in a Russ Abbott sitcom. He was charming and lovely and very supportive and helpful. He always deserves a mention in this story. He really encouraged me. And I got a part in that film, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. I played the traffic warden that gets beaten up. Tiny part, but people, if they remember the film, they remember that. I still get some people, they only know me for that. They're usually Cockneys. Yeah. And they go, you're the traffic warden. Well, I mean, I've done other work, my love, but yes. So when that film came out, it was a huge hit. And Empire magazine did a review of it, right? And I used to read Empire religiously, because at that point I was like, oh, I want to be in films. Yeah. And they mentioned my name in the review. And I can remember reading it on the road in East Sheen. I went, my name, I'm in Empire? And I thought to myself, well, that must be useful somehow. So I put together a tape. Yeah. I filmed myself playing 4 different characters. I wrote the characters. One of them was Keith in his taxi driving around talking like that about Marion and this, that and the other. That tape got shown to 2 people. Hugo Blick, who I went on to make Marion and Geoff with. Right. And Steve Coogan. Julia gave it to Steve. Has he seen it yet? I think he has. Well, okay, another way. Has Steve seen it? Yeah, I think he likes it. He was now doing a residency at the Lyceum in the West End. I, every Friday night, was part of a Radio 5 show that Stuart McConey used to host called The Treatment. 2 artists, me and Laura Shavin, would do funny voices for sketches, and various wits and pundits would come in and talk about the events of the week. Just up the road's Bush House near the Lyceum. So I said, right, I am going to bump into Steve Coogan. So one night I went to this bar where I knew they went. Yeah. I thought, well, I'll talk to Julia. I get there. Julia says, oh, I'm tired, I'm going home. So now it was me and the sound engineer from the radio show. He'd come as well. And I'm sat there with my little drink thinking, how am I going to approach Steve Coogan? Now, this is the guy he was doing this long, I think, record-breaking run at the Lyceum. Right. It was one of his first peaks, you know. Anyway, he saw me there. And he went, oh, and he came over, and he went, oh, you're Julia's friend, aren't you? I said, yes. And he goes, yes, I've seen your tape because it's good. I always remember, he goes, you've got something, right? He said, not everybody has. He said, Julia has, and Simon Pegg was in that show. Yes. Simon has. And he said, I'd like to work with you one day. I mean, how prophetic was that, right? Anyway, off he went. Well, honestly, I walked home on air. Yeah. I went from there down to Waterloo Station. I got on a train, went back. We were living in East Sheen. I woke my wife up.
Absolutely.
I just met Steve Coogan. He's seen my tape. He thinks it's good. I can't tell you what a big deal this was. It was massive. And then began a slow process that resulted in his company, Baby Cow, making Marion and Geoff and Human Remains. I mean, there's a lot more detail. Producing it.
I mean, he was really kind of... He's brought, savvy businessman.
You can't really praise him enough because not just what he does in front of the camera and stuff, but taking a chance on new talent, having the courage of your convictions, whether it was me, the mighty Bush, Julia Davis, he saw Simon Pegg, he's Tim Key, loads of people.
It's like David Frost believing in my dad.
That's right.
He put his money where his mouth was, and also being a performer, but also being savvy to have a production company.
Yeah, one thing that Steve's very good at is he surrounds himself with brilliant people. He's very good at that. he's excellent at that. So he's got the Gibbons now writing Partridge. Prior to that, you know, he was working with Armando and people like Patrick Marber and then Pete Bainham. He had Henry Normo at Baby Cow. So it was always the best people around.
Surrounding. So
yes.
you know, actually, if you're going to do anything with him, it's going
that's
to
right.
be done right. And actually, that's what you want. It's comfy in whatever you do. It's kind of done right.
But quite often, people who have that creative ability, I have to just look at that because I have to be aware.
And so the trip, which I have watched, and so is Dylan, my son, because he's a foodie. We watch it with. I mean, what a gig! Do you love doing it as much?
My son, who's a chef, told me this week that they had a new chef come into the kitchen, and he said he sent me a WhatsApp saying, had a new chef in this week. He said he's been raving about the trip. He said no idea, and he has no idea about me and Harry.
That you know.
I said, have you told him? And he went, not yet. He.
No, that's the thing that you hold it back, do you? When do you say it, and it sounds eloquent and charming.
Yeah.
And
but you could imagine if somebody, you could imagine,
guys.
if a guy's going to, he might go, oh well, actually, but no, he's holding back.
He's holding
back. He's
back.
waiting. Yeah.
But what fun.
Great fun.
Is it scripted or improvisation?
The story, the overall arc is scripted. And in fact, I sometimes feel that Michael Winterbottom has been done a disservice when Steve and I say it's not scripted. Because that's kind of all the work that Michael has done. So how it works is Michael will decide where we're going to go to, right? And then Michael will go there and decide which restaurants and the route, right?
The whole thing.
And Michael will decide the themes that we're going to talk about, and he will script scenes for the plot things that happen, and we will sometimes do those for those scenes verbatim, sometimes loosely. But what I will say is that all the bits that, frankly, people remember and sort of celebrate are the bits that Steve and I just make up.
And do you like improvisation?
Yeah, I love it. Well, Human Remains came from improvisation.
Right.
We had the scripts when we got there, but you can go on YouTube and see us improvising, Julia and I, in her flat, which was one floor above the flat that Kenneth Williams lived in for many years. And that has now evolved. I had a tweet the other day. I read, Rob, that you bought and lived in Kenneth Williams's old flat. So isn't it funny how these stories become something else?
Yes.
So we would improvise stuff, and then you improvise it, but then you finesse it. So it's almost like writing it on the hoof, because with each course of the meal, for the meal bits, we'd eat each course 3 times. So you'd have the starter, and you'd improv and do or just do Michael's material, and cut, maybe change the cameras, maybe bring in another one, do it again, cut, bring in another one, do it again. Cool. Then the main course. You're not meant to talk like that, you learn it. No, I never forget the day. Back and forth, cut. Okay, bring another one. Yeah, I'll never forget that. What are you doing? Get to the chopper. All that stuff.
Not exhausting by the end of the day.
And then another one. And then it's time for pudding. So we do that. And then equally for the stuff where we're walking around places, just again and again and again and again and again.
Yeah. And again. It's beautiful, though. It is. And it's great fun to watch.
I absolutely loved sitting down with Rob and listening to his many stories of not just his own life, but also those of his fantastic, famous friendships in the world of entertainment, including his friendship with my very own incredible dad, Ronnie Corbett. Don't forget to let us know what you thought by rating and reviewing, and make sure to keep an eye out for up and coming episodes. Thanks.